Welcome back to Kings of the North. A harried Doug can't figure out his headphone situation, but we got through it. Sorry, we're late. Also, I may have gotten an athletic director fired. So we have a lot to talk about, Bill Landis, and potentially to apologize for. We're going to run through all the best and most interesting and worst and craziest of week 2 in Northern college football. We're going to focus on Oregon and Michigan off the top because they're two Northern powerhouses who aren't playing like powerhouses. Right now, we are going to debut, I believe, our South Cram-o-meter. And then we're going to run through a bunch of like best teams that got us excited, guys who blew us away, and touch on every team in the North. But Landis, you just watched an old man throwing headphones around the room for 7 minutes. How'd that feel?
It was a real scene. Mike and I were talking to each other, just trying to figure out what was going on over there because you couldn't hear us, and there were times we couldn't hear you. We wanted to call you, but you turned your phone off. Like it was a real mess.
In the middle of the panic, my choice was to turn off my phone because I was like, that'll solve everything. But we're here and we're glad to be here. And I would say that, Bill, this is a little bit of an odd start because I talked on the Saturday show about how I'd introduced myself to Pitt athletic director Heather Like for the first time. She was at the post-game news conference after Pitt's awesome comeback win at Cincinnati on Saturday. She and I talked about how she started at Ohio State. We talked about the changes Pat Narduzzi made in the offseason. And now there are reports out Monday that she got fired. And I'm worried that no athletic director is ever going to talk to Kings of the North ever again.
It's a fair concern. Hopefully this is just a one-off. We don't keep getting ADs fired. It's always surprising when stuff like this. I guess there's not technically a season for athletic directors, right? But it does feel like the football season is AD season in some respects. So it's always odd to see an AD kind of lose their job at this point in the calendar. I don't know. Like reading what I could in the short time we've had, it seems there's a lot of potential issues, I guess, with fundraising there. And maybe she was not doing a good enough job, and they want somebody who can, I guess, get a better handle on modern college athletics, I think is what the statement said, if I can paraphrase it. So, shake up at Pitt.
So good luck to everybody at Pitt.
Yeah,
figuring it out. All right, let's get into, we like to have categories to talk about this. And I will say, we can feel it a little bit, Bill, and our viewers here and our listeners here. Just saw a message on Monday morning on Twitter before my headphones exploded that somebody said, there's a UV tracker on the weather app that I can use to figure out when I need to put sunscreen on, which I found super helpful, which also is a person who's watching the show because they can tell that my face is super red. And then the other thing they said is after listening to the shows last week and watching the shows last week, they were more jacked for Pitt, Cincinnati, and Illinois, Kansas, and Iowa, Iowa State, I think, than they said they were in the past, which is why we're here. We are here to help dedicated, educated, loyal Northern college football fans love their own teams as much as they possibly can, but also understand the teams and the fan bases that are kind of like them, that are right around them, and that often get overlooked. And that just made my heart a flutter, Bill. Like if we can get people jacked up for Illinois, Kansas, and then that game delivers, mission accomplished.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing over the weekend, I think, is some of those more off the radar games. Not for us necessarily, but maybe for other people, were really good, right? Yeah, like Kansas State was great, and Kansas Illinois was great, and Pitt Cincinnati was great. So I'm glad that those games delivered.
So Jordan is noting show starting promptly at 12:08. Again, wild headphone mishap. Totally on me, and I apologize for being late. Kyle notes, starting to really look forward to this Monday show. It's a great recap of the games in the North.
Thank you.
If my heart wasn't racing because I couldn't turn my headphones on, I'd be crying tears of joy right now. All right, let's talk about the team that that changed my mind. So this is one of our categories we do every Monday. The team that changed my mind is Oregon, because I went into the weekend expecting angry Oregon, expecting here we go, Oregon. It was one of my best bets on Bets of the North on Friday morning with T-Shoe was Oregon -19, -20, -21. And that is not at all what happened. We talked about it a little bit as it was finishing up on Saturday night, Bill, which is why we want to start with it here. Number one, I'm not so sure that Boise isn't better than Oregon. rewatching that whole game, I just thought to myself, well, I don't know. These teams are the same. What is the difference between a team that a lot of people picked to win the national championship and a team that is trying to be the playoff team in the group of 5? So good luck to the 5 seed in the playoff if you're getting Boise State and Ashton Genty in the first round. But there wasn't a ton, Bill, about Oregon that I thought, well, okay, well, like that's the difference between a team like Oregon and a team like Boise. They clearly made some big plays. Evan Stewart made some big plays. Tez Johnson had a huge punt return that swung the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it was surprisingly evenly matched to me in a game that was a 3-touchdown spread and is the power conference of all power conference teams and a group of 5 team. Like, yeah, fluky at all to me that Boise was in that game. I'm not so sure as Oregon scored 2 special teams touchdowns. I'm not sure it didn't feel fluky that Oregon won.
It kind of did feel fluky that Oregon won to me. Like, you get 2 special teams touchdowns are not in any way reliable. Good for the Ducks for finding them in a game where they desperately needed them. But that to me looked like an evenly matched game as well. And I always I think the best barometer of that is on the line of scrimmage, right? And if Oregon's offensive line is not pushing around Boise the way you think they should, and then Boise is able to find what it did running the ball. Now that comes with Ashton Genty, right? Like a normal running back maybe wouldn't have found as much against Oregon as Ashton did, but so Ashton Genty is very good. Yeah. But I wanted to see Oregon, and frankly, the defensive front was fine against Idaho, but that's not a great barometer. I wanted to see Oregon come out in this game against Boise and kind of just own the line. And it didn't on either side of the ball. And maybe that is a little more forgivable defensively when you are facing Ashton Genty, excuse me. But I thought that was a pretty poor showing for Oregon's offensive line, which is, I kind of feel like the thing that people thought was maybe, I don't know, most reliable for Oregon coming into the season. Like if you're changing a quarterback and you're changing over so much at the skill positions, with those 2 tackles coming back and another offensive line starter, I think people were assuming that Oregon might be able to lean on its offensive line at the start of the year. And clearly that's not been the case through 2 games.
You mentioned this. Is it Matthew Bedford, the Oregon guard who has not played for the first 2 games and is sorely missed? The PFF grades for guards, I looked at, it went to 156 power conference guards who have played the requisite amount of snaps through the first 2 games. Oregon's 2 primary guards are ranked 131st and 155th out of 156 guards. Their center is 69th out of 72. And they are mixing and matching. They are searching. Dan Lanning talked about that after the game. He said, we like to rotate on the offensive line. This is a thing we sometimes do. But there's a difference between rotating and desperately searching for what might work. And at the moment, nothing is working inside. There were pressures that came, guys just getting beat, guys just absolutely getting beat. I think they had 4 penalties on the offensive line. Like, it is a real problem. The tackles are still pretty good. Johnny Cornelius, that's the guy you like best, right? At right tackle, that's your guy?
Yeah. They're both good, but yeah.
Josh Connolly gave up a sack on like the 3rd play of the game where he kind of tried to cut the edge and the guy like just completely whiffed and just gave up a sack. Dylan Gabriel, they gave up sacks on consecutive plays to a safety where they did not adjust their protection and did not recognize what was coming. And Boise was like, well, I don't know, let's do that again. And it worked twice in a row. There was another one where they had the right guard was supposed to, what's it called, Landis, when you have the left tackle lined up right in front of the edge guy, but then the left tackle blocks down and the right guard is supposed to pull around and take the edge guy? What's that called?
Like a fold block?
Okay. It didn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's take an interior guy where they are struggling and try to get him out to the edge rusher before and didn't even come close to working. Like, just absolute failures repeatedly. And I think they gave up, they gave up 5 sacks all of last year and they gave up 4 sacks against Boise? Is that the stat?
The stat. So they gave up 5 last year. They've given up 7 so far this year. If we went up by a game, it's 3.5 per game this year. Last year, it was 0.36 per game. Tackles for loss last year, They allowed 3.1 per game. This year, they've allowed 6.5 per game. And I've got one more stat for you. Oregon last year was number 4 in the country in an offensive, like front 7 havoc rate, which is basically like how well or how good are you at limiting tackles for loss and sacks and just plays in your backfield generally. They were number 4 in the country last year, currently number 101 in the country.
This is their defensive line causing havoc. They're not having it. Oh, giving up havoc.
This is giving up havoc. Yes.
Okay. Because we're talking about both sides of the line here. It's like try to fix Oregon, right? Mm-hmm. And they have Oregon State this week, and it's like, hey, you know what Oregon State wants to do? Beat their rival all the time, but also beat their rival after their conference imploded and Oregon State was left floating. Yeah. Their defensive tackles, I thought, played pretty well. Derek Harmon had a bad blow to the head on the quarterback penalty that was really a problem early, but he got reliable penetration. Jamari Caldwell, another transfer, got pretty reliable penetration. They got after the quarterback inside. There were times when Boise max protected and was able to run guys deep and hit a couple throws. Yeah. Boise's really good. Boise is, I was not on the bandwagon because I was kind of searching, Fresno State. Boise's the playoff team in the group of 5, right? They have to go win the Mountain West, but Genty's going to get them a lot of attention, but they're legitimately good. They do a lot right. They hung right with Oregon. So I did think there were at times that Oregon defensively made plays when they needed to. Jordan Birch at linebacker, I thought had a pretty good game and made some plays. Jabbar Muhammad gave up a thing here or there, but also then in some one-on-one coverage was really good. So I think you can see the defense getting there a little bit when it needs to. This interior offensive line thing, and they have a guy coming back. And when that guy gets healthy, when Bedford gets healthy, it's going to make a huge difference. But it is a gigantic shift and a gigantic issue that makes them kind of not able to do what they want to do offensively right now, and they need to solve it.
Yeah, I think Bedford coming back will help some, but then they're just going to put one of those guards that aren't playing very well at center, and I think that's still a problem.
Okay.
So it'll be a little better, I think. And also, by the way, to go back to a point you made earlier, we like to rotate on the offensive line is something coaches say when they don't have 5 good offensive linemen. So that's not a philosophical choice by Dan Lanning. That's we don't know what we're doing statement from Dan Lanning. So I'm not out on Oregon's defensive front 7. I think Ashton Jeanty is very good, and he's going to get his. So I'm willing to give a little bit of a benefit of a doubt there. We'll see when they play Oregon State this week, because Oregon State wants to line up and run it at you too. So if they come out of another game where they look a little soft against the run, then maybe I'll be concerned. It's all about the offensive line for me. It's 2 things. It's the offensive line, and this offense is not very explosive at the moment. They're like 50% off the pace of where they were last year in terms of explosive plays 2 games into the season. They're not scoring a lot. They have 6 touchdowns in 2 games, which maybe a lot of teams would love to have 6 touchdowns in 2 games. Oregon probably would prefer to have about 12 touchdowns in 2 games, given the way they want to operate. So there are a lot of issues with this offense, I think. It starts up front, but there are issues at other places as well that they got to get figured out.
And it's one of those things, you can't have the thing that's not think criticize them, but last year it's they're just so dink and dunk. It's I don't know how good Bo Nix is going to be in the NFL. And then, by the way, he got to Denver and dinked and dunked and it didn't go so well. But they were really efficient last year, right? And now listen, Bo Nix, and I was double checking the big plays. I think he was still 26 of 51 on passes of 20 yards or more last year. They were still at times, they would kill you with Troy Franklin and those guys. They are really reliant on the big play right now because there is not the efficiency. So Evan Stewart is out there making fools out of people on big plays a couple times a game, and Dylan Gabriel will drop it in your bucket. But this is instead of being a machine right now for Oregon, which is why I almost thought they looked more like the underdog team, right? Because they were all about big plays. Evan Stewart is incredibly talented, and Dylan Gabriel, as a veteran quarterback, knows how to take advantage when his guy gets open deep. He didn't hit him every time, but he hit him enough. But 2 special team scores, 2 big plays, but the click, the metronome-like efficiency that they were all about last year, even inside some of their run game, it works when Jordan James gets stopped and bounces on his own, but there is just not a lot. I even thought they converted a really important short yardage play that basically allowed them to go win the game And it was like Terrence Ferguson, our guy at tight end, came up and faked like he was going under center, then went back into an H-back spot, then ran like a little route behind the line of scrimmage, and they flipped it to him, and he got it by a foot on 3rd and 1, right? Like it was like they ran a hook and ladder at the line of scrimmage to try to be something that got nothing. Like they were going in their bag because like the reliability of we're going to just lean on you and tempo you and efficiency you, like that is not there right now.
No, it's not. That fake center sneak, then release him into the flat play, by the way, is like the play du jour in college football. I feel like I saw it like 5. I think I saw it like 5 times last week. Yeah. So that's probably part of the reason why Boise wasn't terribly caught off guard by it, because they were probably on alert for that after teams used, like Akron tried to use it against Ohio State. I think it actually worked. So that's like a new thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Trayshawn Holden had like a thing where he got shoved out of bounds and they got up and shoved the guy back and got a penalty. Like there was just like they didn't look like a national championship caliber team. And the thing that looks like it is individual elite players who can make plays kind of on their own, but team wide as a system, from a coaching standpoint, it's not there right now, and it is enough of a thing. A couple bad angles at times, like that. I'm just looking at my notes here. It's like there was a play where Genty like ran wild, like literally untouched through a perfectly blocked hole on the right side. It's like anybody could have gotten through that. And then there are other ones where it's like he breaks a tackle in the backfield that could have been a 3-yard loss. Now it's a 20-yard gain. But he had another one where there were like 7 guys in the box and the safeties came up and took a couple bad angles, right? And then it's like, okay, well, like you can't let that stuff happen. So Derek Harmon really made a difference, I think, at times. Like, again, they with Caldwell's from Houston, right? Is that right? And Harmon's from Michigan State, and like still Uyunglele, and like they have some really good guys up front that did make a difference. Yeah. But they've gotta, it's one of those things. Week 1 is week 1, and I know they moved the ball in week 1 and had little things here and there that prevented them from putting up a big score. But like Boise's good, but they did not exert their will. And it was enough that made me wonder, like, not that they won't ever do it, but like they have some strides to make before they can. And it really starts. I don't know, like I wouldn't say that it's only the interior of the offensive line, but it's like they have to get that fixed before anything else is going to work.
Yeah, I think it's predominantly the interior of the offensive line. They have to, and I don't know. I don't know what the ceiling is there. It's probably not all that high, if I'm being perfectly honest. Because they lost Jackson Powers Johnson, who was the best center in the country last year, and sometimes those shoes are hard to fill.
So it's one of those things, like we're kind of joking about it while we're doing this Saturday show. It's like, oh, Oregon's going to lose to Boise. And then you watch it, it's like, man, I think Oregon should have lost to Boise. So again, it would not have been the worst loss of the weekend. Boise is significantly better than Northern Illinois. We talked about Notre Dame a lot on Saturday night. So like, we're coming back. They found a way. You get credit for that. 2-0 matters, but when you're talking about a team with national championship goals, there are real things they need to work out. And here's the thing, like if they keep playing like this, then Ohio State at home is going to be a problem, and road trips to places like Michigan and Wisconsin are going to be a problem, because if you're not efficient in your own place, it's going to be hard to be efficient in Camp Randall. It's going to be hard to be efficient in the Big House. And now you're relying on only big plays against teams that have a better chance to match you athletically. And now that's a formula that is not a formula I think Oregon wants to get into. So, okay. Team that changed your mind is Michigan. Not in a good way, right? Not in a good way?
Not in a good way. No, we talked about it a little bit on Saturday, so we don't have to, I think, maybe go too long on this. I guess just where I'm at with Michigan is I still think that defense is pretty good, like very good. It's a very good defense that came up against a very good offense in Texas, and the very good offense won out. That's not the first time we've seen that happen. It won't be the last. My fear for Michigan now is that, particularly against this schedule, this offense is never going to get good enough to help its defense. And I don't know that Michigan's defense can carry Michigan to the 10 wins that I think it needs to make the playoff. And maybe it's unfair to have a playoff conversation with a team that lost so much, but they're the defending national champs. And I don't see a team that's going to get there now. I had them in the last time we did playoff rankings, and I think there's far too much wrong with that offense for them to ever get to the point where they're going to do that. With Oregon coming there, with USC in a couple weeks, obviously with Ohio State, like the question was always, what can you do kind of in those 4 games? Can you win 2 of them? And I don't know that I see a team that can anymore with the way that they're playing offense.
If they can somehow get quarterback figured out, whether that's Alex Orji playing more, whether it's Davis Warren finding a groove, whether it's getting to Jaden Davis, the true freshman in the middle of October, like is that it? Or are there things with the offensive line and the run game, like who Michigan wants to be, that are still would be there?
No, there's things that are there. It's across the board. Like I would even start with the offensive coordinator. Like maybe Michigan should have gone outside to bring in a more experienced offensive coordinator rather than promoting Kirk Campbell. He's 2 games into his tenure there, so I'm not saying it was automatically a poor hire, but the early returns have not been great. Quarterback obviously has not been very good. I don't think the offensive line's very good. I don't think Donovan Edwards is the number 1 running back, and their receivers aren't doing enough either. The receivers through 2 games have 17 receptions for 147 yards and 1 touchdown. It's basically, what can Colston Loveland do? That's the offense right now. And as good as I think Colston Loveland is, that's not going to help you beat Texas, Oregon, USC, and Ohio State.
And then he just like dropped the ball for a fumble against Texas too, which is like, well, no, that when you're putting the whole offense on a guy, then maybe it's like, okay, you kind of were more on like the Donovan Edwards vision thing. I don't know about this. I always really liked Donovan Edwards. To your point, Mullings is going to be it could be the hammer in there, but if they're going to be explosive at all, it doesn't feel like they're going to be explosive in the passing game. They need to be explosive in the run game. And if Donovan Edwards is not going to do that, then they're not going to have any kind of explosion. And now you are grind it out, because there were at times last year with JJ McCarthy, when called upon, and a deeper group of receivers where you could do it at times. Like that was the thing I thought about Michigan last year, is like they had an identity, but then when needed, they could sort of move outside their identity. Like it's identity plus, which is everything's a plus now, right? Like that would be your service. Like, oh, did you subscribe to identity? It's like, oh, Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. We'll get to that later. They're talking about identity. Everybody wants to talk about identity early in the year, but identity plus, you are what you are. You focus on certain things. You prioritize it. You're really good at it. But then when a team stops that, then what? So JJ McCarthy is identity plus, right? That Michigan had at the end of Harbaugh, I knew exactly what it was, but is that enough? So now I don't know if they have the plus, but also they might not have the identity if they can't get up there with a bunch of NFL guys on the offensive line and hammer back and just pound you. So, and that's a really good point about the offensive coordinator, because and again, just like talking, I think there's a lot of agreement, right? Like even when we had Godfrey on last week, on the big Michigan show we did, that like I think it had to be Sharon Moore, but it didn't have to be Kirk Campbell. And like they kept the defensive coordinator hire in the family with Wink Martindale. He taught Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter how to do this. Like he hadn't worked at Michigan, but it's like he may as well have worked at Michigan. Mm-hmm. That is like a really good point by you, that I understand Michigan wanting to still be Michigan with the way it went about things. But again, identity plus. We're this. Sharon Moore's our guy. We're going to stick with the defensive system. But what's your plus? Well, we brought in the guy who's going to help us think about offense a little different way. And they didn't do that at all. That would have been the opportunity to do that. Well said by you, Bill Landis. I don't know. Have people talking about that? People aren't talking about that.
No, I don't think so. But even Wink Martindale, if it's in the family, like Wink Martindale's going to do things a little differently, clearly, than Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald did. So it's like, if there, I don't have an example for you off the top of my head, but if there's somebody out there who's like either on the Harbaugh tree or adjacent to it, who has some similar philosophical ideas, but can maybe bring a little something different to the table as well, that probably makes more sense. And it's easy to say now, right? In hindsight, like they're not playing very well and they have a rather inexperienced offensive coordinator. Maybe he can figure it out too. One more thing I want to mention on Michigan's offense, because we talked about Jaden Davis, I think on Saturday a little bit at quarterback.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about Jordan Marshall, the freshman running back that they got. It was a big deal. Ooh. They beat Ohio State for him. Kid out of Cincinnati. Hasn't played on offense yet. He's played some special team snaps. I'd give him some touches and see if anything can shake out there.
It's one of those things, right, that, we're going to talk about Illinois in a second. Illinois had 2 backs who looked really good in week 1. And then in the fourth quarter against Kansas, they brought in a freshman, Khalil Valentine, and gave him the ball like 6 times on a final drive. Like just you've got to be willing to use some of these guys to help you. And if Jordan Marshall can come in on the third or fourth series against USC and give you a boost, right? Maybe hand him the ball a bunch. Maybe don't ask him to pass protect, do the things. Everybody's worried. Tony Alford was always worried about young guys pass protecting at Ohio State, right? It's like, oh, we can't play the running back because he can't pass protect. Don't call me pass plays.
Right.
Let him run.
Just run the ball.
Just
you
let
can't
him run.
pass anyway. You can't pass anyway.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it.
Yeah. So but look for something. Because this is a thing. And this is, again, tip of the cap to Michigan for scheduling Texas and being willing to do this. You know, even like Arkansas State next week on Saturday, like Arkansas State is not Western Illinois, right? I mean, like even Arkansas State's kind of a team. So like there's no MAC teams. There's no FCS teams on this schedule. Like they are putting themselves in quite a position here. And then, by the way, USC, welcome to the Big Ten, come into the big house in September. So if I think last year's Michigan team would have been ready for this schedule. Now, listen, Texas beat bad. Not that it would have been easy, but like if you told Jim Harbaugh and J.J. McCarthy and Mike Sainristil and all those guys, like, hey, you ready for Texas and USC in September? I think they would have been like, let's go. And then this year's team could have used last year's schedule when you wouldn't have found out. Like Michigan could be 8-0. And we'd be like, are they any good? It's like, I don't know. I can't tell. We were doing that last year. And it's like, the answer was, yes, they are very good. They could have tricked us for 6 weeks if they weren't playing Texas and USC in September. All right. They have some stuff to figure out. So those are the two teams that like changed our mind the most. We have a bunch of other categories to get to. We're going to do like every team in the North, or at least going to touch on them a little bit, because we want to talk smartly about your team, but we do just really want to help you find the most interesting little nuggets about the other teams in the North. But first, the South can cram it. We need to lean into our identity, Bill.
Okay.
My room is a mess. Seriously. It looks like somebody murdered a bulldog in this office below the table because it is swords and Georgia hats everywhere. I should just pour some ketchup on the floor and it will look like an absolute murder scene. There's also 6 pairs of headphones down here because I was basically going, oh my God, I can't find my headphones. How hard can the South cram it? This is our South Cram-o-meter that we didn't get into last week because we ran out of time because we had like 27 Northern games to discuss. Mm-hmm. We each must come up with a final rating of 1 to 1,000 on how hard the South can cram it this week. No decimals. That's why we go to 1,000. So you can't have 867.31.
Okay.
1,000 is cram it so hard. 1 is cram it not at all. I feel like I'm reading the instructions for the SAT. So here are the things that we can factor into the South can cram-o-meter. Auburn as a 10 or 11 point favorite lost to Cal. Alabama only led South Florida 14-13 entering the fourth quarter. Oklahoma, the team that I picked to have the Heisman winner and make the playoff, got outgained by Houston and won 16-12. Oklahoma State, maybe Arizona, one of 2 Southern contenders in the Big 12, fell behind Arkansas, who's like the 11th best team in the SEC and needed double overtime to win.
Arkansas, who was like hoping it would lose big so it could fire its coach, and then played too well and too close of a loss. Yeah, you
can cram it for that. Yeah, Arkansas can cram it. What are they trying to do? They're going to hire Bob. Isn't Bobby Petrino the offensive coordinator at Arkansas?
Yeah, I think he's orchestrating a coup as we speak.
Are they trying? Yeah. Oh, it's just too. I mean, for real. If you're offended that we're telling the South to cram it, like, come on. Making Bobby Petrino your offensive coordinator. Come on. LSU led Nichols only 23-21 at one point in the third quarter. And Georgia did hammer Tennessee Tech, but Tennessee Tech is 25-55 in the last 8 years. So before we go throwing our flowers at the dogs, it's like, okay, congratulations on finding the worst team that you could possibly play. And then the cherry on top is ESPN is going to South Carolina LSU this week for game day? Are you kidding me? Was there not a middle school game that you could find? Oh my God. Is there anybody that can even possibly pretend to care about South Carolina LSU? But wow. Awful.
Big win for Shane Beamer this weekend.
Guess who can't pretend? Yeah. We cannot. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, listen, I'm making fun of dog mentality, but what I possibly could never have is cock mentality. For real? Oh, ESPN's going to South Carolina. Let's get fired up. Are you kidding me? What are they going to, what is there? Is there a tree grove? Are they going to be people in seersucker suits? What, like, why are they going? Why am I'm supposed to tune in to College Game Day to celebrate?
Why are they going to Madison?
Because they're mad. Because they're mad at the Big Ten. Because they're mad. Yeah, they're mad. Everybody's mad. Because you chose your side. Guess what side we chose?
They can go to Missouri. BC, Missouri.
Go to Missouri, BC. But BC's on our side too. We should be at BC, Missouri. We should be at BC, Missouri, and like talking behind the scenes with Missouri about like, listen, man.
Yeah.
We're right here for you. We'd really like to have you, but you've just got to make a couple changes. So I think the South can cram it kind of hard. They really, if Bama had lost to USF, we'd be past 1,000, but they managed to pull away with their superior roster in the fourth quarter. How crammy are you feeling right now when it comes to the South?
I feel like the baseline crammy is always going to be still pretty high, I think, but I'm worried. Yeah. I'm worried that I'm low. I'm at 787.
Oh, that's pretty good low? Though.
Is that good? Okay.
If you told someone that you were going to cram it, like I'm going to cram it on you, and they were like, "Ugh, can you try not to cram it too hard? How hard do you think you'll cram it?" And if you said, "I'm going to cram it 787," they'd be like, "Oh God." So that's pretty good. I will accept 787. I'll go 843. Okay. So that's a pretty good. Like there wasn't, other than Auburn losing to Cal. Who's the Auburn coach? Gus Malzahn, for real? Is that right? No, it's not Gus Malzahn.
It's worse. It's Hugh Freeze.
Gus. Hugh Freeze, who sounds like a Spider-Man villain. I know, like Hugh Freeze made his reputation beating Bama. And he made his reputation doing something else. Is
that how he made his reputation?
When you lose to Cal, I got one piece of advice for the boosters and the reporters at Auburn. Check his phone, man. Check his phone. You lose to Cal, it's time to check your phone.
Yeah. Hugh Freeze, who's trotting out Michigan State cast off Peyton Thorne at quarterback and losing to Cal.
Again, where would the South be without us to just hand them these people? They're so okay. That's a good hefty cram it. 787 and 843. That is go find a South Cram-o-meter somewhere else. I can't believe they're going to South Carolina. We're going to Madison. KOTN's going to Madison. I made one effort at trying to like get a Bama can cram it tailgate going. Didn't really happen. A year from now, I would hope we would be in Bama can cram it tailgate mode. Wisconsin's going to Bama next year, right? So home and home.
It is. Is it definitely next year? Yeah.
I don't know. Can we check that? We should go next year, and then we can have a Bama can cram it tailgate, KOTN Bama can cram it tailgate in Tuscaloosa. Would that be better?
I think so.
Bring your cheese.
Bring your cheese. Yeah, bring your own cheese. BYOC. Yeah, Saturday, September 13th. Okay. Wisconsin at Alabama.
BYOC. Bring your own cheese and bring your own cram it. We'll do it next year in Tuscaloosa. All right. When we come back, we'll be getting into our teams of the week, the teams that got us excited, the guys that blew us away, the games we're glad we saw, teams with big questions beyond Oregon and Michigan. All of that and more ahead on Kings of the North. Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. And as Sam pointed out, Doug looks so youthful and happy when he is telling the South to cram it. I feel youthful and happy. I was pretty rattled at the start of the show. I felt old. I felt feeble. I felt incompetent. And then I just thought about Hugh Freeze losing to Cal. And it just was an absolute vitamin injection right in my thigh. Just went, bam. Whoop. Cram it. All right. So but it makes me, because this is cram it, but then this is like when I'm feeling myself about cramming it. I kind of want to keep it on like this the rest of the show. Do I look like a professional right now? I don't know.
Yeah. Professional crammer. Yeah.
Man, our tailgate's going to be great. Please join us in Tuscaloosa, September 13th. We will be at the Ohio State-Texas game at the Horseshoe on August 30th for our first Cram It tailgate, and then we'll be in Tuscaloosa 2 weeks later for Wisconsin, Alabama. And I don't even think I'm joking, Bill. Cram It tailgate.
Yeah.
Our teams of the week. This is we want to acknowledge, like we talked about them some on Saturday, but we want to like really dig in on some Northern teams that really got it done. And who's your team of the week?
My team of the week is Iowa State. Huge win in Iowa City against Iowa. We talked about it a little bit on Saturday. We talked mostly about the offense and Rocco Becht and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll and some of the big plays they were able to spring late in that game. I wanted to shine a little bit on the defense. The Iowa State's defense got a lot figured out, I thought, in the second half against Iowa. Now, you may scoff at that and say, well, duh, it's Iowa. Of course they did. I think it's a slightly different version of Iowa that Iowa State kind of made look like the old Iowa in the second half. A lot of punts, a lot of 3 and outs, just not a whole lot going on the offensive side of the ball for the Hawkeyes in the second half. And I thought it was because of some guys stepping up on Iowa State's defense in a really major way that had me feeling pretty good about where that defense is headed. And they did it down a couple of linebackers, as we talked about going into that game. And the true freshman that had to start, Cal Brazina, I thought had a pretty nice game after settling in. There's a stat that PFF has called it's defensive stops. It's basically plays that result in a quote unquote failure for the defense, and they can attribute them to individual players. He tied for the team lead with 3. So like he was pretty good, I think, in a tough spot. Dom Orange on the defensive line, I thought, stepped up, made a key stop early in the game to help hold Iowa to a field goal. The defense in general held Iowa to 2 field goals inside the 5-yard line. Big stands early in that game that kind of keep Iowa State hanging around. And I thought it was a nice defensive performance and a really nice job of making adjustments to get to the point where Iowa, on its final 6 possessions, had 23 yards and punted 5 times.
They Iowa.
Yeah.
Which is, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more because I have something else in a later category, but there was a point in that game where you were like, that's it. And there were like Matt Campbell can't win big game memes popping up in the first half, and it felt over. And so, yes, we knew the explosive potential of the Iowa State offense, but to stand up defensively, listen, John Haycock gets it done, right? This Iowa State team also has a defensive identity. We understand that, but you're never going to out defense Iowa right now. And so to stand up like that, because again, this isn't a shootout, you have to give your offense a chance. And really good, like get a big play and then get a stop. Just like the Big 12 is in a super interesting spot right now. Kansas State had a goofy game. Kansas just lost. We have a huge Kansas State Arizona game coming up on Friday night. West Virginia got itself back under a little bit, but like this, I'm really curious, Landis, how propulsive this can be for Iowa State, because they're off this week. They have a nice little off week to marinate in this, but this is, you find a way, like make winning plays. Not the team that I'm going to talk about. It's about like making winning plays when you have to against a really good opponent in a rivalry game. I don't know. Is this Matt Campbell? I don't want to say something that's stupid. This is one of Matt Campbell's bigger wins, clearly.
Yeah, I think you could put it up there. I guess I wouldn't want to speak out of turn either without actually going back and looking through it. But Iowa had a ton of momentum. People were really excited about its offense. I think people were starting to get on board with the idea of Iowa as like a playoff dark horse. The game is in Iowa City. You're down 13-0, and then you come back and you win. Yeah, it's got to. If it's not the best, it's got to be top 2 or 3.
Very cool. All right. The team that I want to talk about as my team of the week is Illinois. And I also want to talk about making winning plays. And I also want to talk about that Brett Bielema gave us a little hint of what he thought was coming on Saturday night, and we should have paid attention to it. It might have gotten you over the top, Landis. You were on the edge of picking Illinois to win this game against Kansas, and you didn't. If you had known that it was probably the biggest recruiting day in Brett Bielema's tenure at Illinois with the guys they were bringing in for that game, would you have gotten over the top on picking the Illini?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe the problem with the like we talked, it was a sellout, and I think they might have been like 0-6 in their previous 6 sellouts. It's like usually Illinois is in the big spot like that and doesn't handle it well. So, but they handled it well this week.
They handled it.
Last week.
Quote from Brett Bielema after the game: "We have more recruits here, committed players and guys that we've offered than any other time since we've been here. To go out there and play the way we did, to make it a four-quarter game and put that environment, and at the end of the game to have that celebration is a pretty memorable thing." Always intrigued by when you have a huge recruiting weekend and then you lose, like how you bounce back from that. A lot of momentum here and just like multiple things to call out. You talked about this going into the game. On Saturday night, Aaron Henry, the defensive coordinator, felt like Kansas had his number last year, was clearly talked about during the week. I think the defense played for Aaron Henry and he made smart adjustments and, but his guys rallied around him. Huge. Illinois forced for 4 turnovers. They have 8 takeaways so far this year. That's tied for the most in the country. Last year, they had 15 takeaways the whole season, which was 100th in the country. And there can be some luck to turnovers. There is some luck to turnovers. Sometimes there's a lot of luck to turnovers, but they made like multiple plays in this game. 3 Jalen Daniels interceptions. 2 were kind of just like he underthrew balls a little bit when maybe he thought he had somebody there. The other one, which is the second Xavier Scott pick, it's what Aaron Henry and Brett Bielema were talking about after the game, like playing with confidence and triggering and trusting yourself. And they did that really well under Ryan Walters 2 years ago. It's what got Ryan Walters the Purdue job. Xavier Scott, they're throwing it's just a horrible play call by Kansas. Last minute of the first half, they're throwing like a little bubble on 3rd and 10 and hoping that's going to get them a first down. They may as well have taken a knee practically. But Lance Leipold said like they didn't block it up right or something. But Xavier Scott sees it, triggers, doesn't hesitate, cuts it off, makes the play, and runs it back for a pick 6. And there's a confidence in that, Bill, that you have to even allow yourself to give yourself the opportunity to do something like that. Then just like down the stretch for Illinois, when they needed it at the end, where it's like if they give up the ball here, Kansas is going to have a chance to come back and score. Luke Altmaier on a 2nd and 17 scrambled for a first down. It was huge. On a 3rd and 10, hit a deep out to Pat Bryant. Really nice throw for a first down. It was huge. Zachary Franklin, who we talked about as a huge transfer late in the offseason, had a huge catch on a sideline tiptoe where Altmaier scrambled, and on 3rd and 12, hit him right in the hands, and Zachary Franklin made an unbelievable catch.
Crazy
kept
catch.
that drive alive. It all resulted in Kansas not getting the ball back until there was a minute left.
Yep.
If they hadn't made plays like that, Illinois was setting itself up to have the kind of game where they played well, they fought hard, and then they didn't get it done at the end. And instead, they made like 5 winning plays. One more I want to talk about. Right after Illinois scored, I think, to take the lead, Kansas is trying now to come back and answer. T-Raw Edwards, who's a 5th-year guy from Columbus, Ohio. He's a first-year starter this year, splits a double team. He's an interior defensive lineman, splits a double team on 3rd down and flushes Jalen Daniels out and forces an incompletion to stop that drive when it would have been the Kansas answer drive. And then at the end, we mentioned him before, the true freshman, Khalil Valentine, they put him in and just ran him like 6 times. He had a huge cut on a 3rd and 6 to convert a first down. Honestly, like you can point probably to 7 plays in that game where if they don't make it, they don't make that winning play, they give Kansas a chance. And instead, they made play after play after play to not give Kansas a chance. I incredibly underestimated Illinois coming into this year. The offense was not very good for most of the game. It converted in the 4th quarter when they needed to. The defense is playing awesome, which is how this team was good a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But winning plays at home against a ranked opponent with a bunch of with a sellout crowd and a bunch of recruits in the stands. Brett Bielema is like hugging his family and practically crying after the game. That's because Illinois did so much right in this game. absolute respect for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to add to that other than saying or echoing kind of what you said at the end. There's like it's maybe starting to feel a little bit like Ryan Walters era Illinois when that defense was really cooking, was kind of leading the team. I don't want to put too much on the defense just yet and say that this one game gets them there, obviously, but there was a lot of really good stuff from the Illinois defense against a good Kansas offense that I think is maybe still trying to figure some stuff out, but good nonetheless. Yeah, and Illinois just like kind of dominated the fourth quarter, which I just think says a lot about a team. If you can go through 3 quarters of some stuff not going your way, especially on offense, and then you just kind of dig down and make the winning plays that you just cataloged there, almost all in the fourth quarter, it's pretty good. That says a lot about what you got going on, and I think is also suggesting that maybe Illinois might be ready to turn a corner here.
Really good. All right, I got pretty excited there. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Who's another team that got you kind of irrationally excited, Bill?
Yeah, I don't know about irrationally excited. I was very excited and happy to see that Boston College has handled business against Duquesne. Right? We talked about how important I think it was to Bill O'Brien to start off their home slate on a good foot. They're playing not a great FCS team, but we've seen games like this get kind of wonky before. And they just went out and hammered Duquesne 56-0. And like they started with a 3-and-out, and then it was over from there. It was touchdown, pick six, touchdown to go out 42-0 at halftime. And if Boston College is a program that wants to be taken seriously, that if Bill O'Brien is a coach that wants people to think that this program is going in a good direction, then I think coming off of a huge emotional win like they had against Florida State and coming home and just annihilating a very overmatched opponent the way they're supposed to is a pretty good sign of things to come, I think. So excited about the game they have this week against Missouri. Obviously, that is a much more stiffer test than playing Duquesne, but wanted to give Boston College some props for handling the business the way I think they should have.
So we're going to definitely do a big game breakdown this week on the Thursday show, unless we do it on the Wednesday show on Wisconsin-Bama, right? That deserves it.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a big game breakdown on Boston College, Missouri?
There are a couple other candidates. Like that's definitely one of them. I think Kansas State, Arizona could be worthy of one. So I guess it'll just depend on how many we want to do this week. But yeah, maybe. I was looking at some stuff. I believe the highest graded quarterback in the North right now is Thomas Castellanos on PFF. So that's what happens when you throw 4 touchdown passes on 10 pass attempts against Duquesne. But yeah, maybe that game deserves one.
I feel like because Boston College has kind of jumped on the scene and beat Florida State on Monday night in week 1, and then they came back and played a much lesser opponent. So we've talked about them, but I kind of would like to break them down a little bit.
Yeah.
Like what it is exactly that they're doing well. And like, I'd like to break, like Brady Cook, Thomas Castellanos, go to that game, ESPN, for real.
Yeah.
Garrett Nussmeier, who's the South Carolina quarterback? Do you know? Is it still Spencer Rattler?
No, it's not still Spencer Rattler. I do know his name is. I was watching that game a little bit on Saturday, but I can't remember his name.
Okay. Should have gone there. Maybe we'll do a big game breakdown. All right. Let's talk about the team that got me excited, and it's BYU. And they did a lot right in this game. They beat SMU, was favored by like 2 touchdowns. The over-under on this game was 55.5, and the final score was 18-15. Kalani Sitake after the game said, "I told you it was going to be a defensive battle," and it really was. You know, the BYU offense did just enough. But the thing that got me the most excited is a guy named Braden Keim, who is the 6'9" right tackle for BYU. He was in the recruiting class of 2016. He then went on a mission and then came back and now is in his 6th year with the actual football program. This is a super old guy. And he's an NFL prospect, people say. But there is a play that he made that had nothing to do with blocking that I would like us to run now. Watch after this pick. Watch the BYU guy who makes the tackle and prevents this from being a pick 6 for SMU. Mike, let's run this. So this is a crazy pick. A defensive lineman falls down, stands up, picks it off, and Braden Keim, the right tackle, gets over there and gets his body. He's kind of like he's pass rushing. All of a sudden, the defensive guy is running with the ball. He gets over and makes a tackle at the 3.5 yard line. he like makes a perfect form tackle and sticks his shoulder in the guy's chest. It's just bad luck for Jake Retzlaff. The defensive lineman had fallen down and then he stood up right in front of the guy. Retzlaff never saw him. If he doesn't make that tackle and saves a touchdown for BYU right there, BYU loses. Because you know what happened on the next play that SMU ran? They fumbled. So they didn't even just hold SMU to a field goal there in a game where SMU got held to 5 field goals. It was a goofy fumble by SMU. I actually think they ran a play, there was a penalty, and then the next actual play is when they fumbled. But like that awareness, Bill, because you can see him, he notices what's going on, and then he runs a little bit wide to set himself up so he's not diving at somebody's ankles. He's trying to tackle an offensive tackle, trying to tackle a defensive tackle here. Gigantic play, football awareness, toughness, form tackle, saves the game for BYU.
He looked like a linebacker. It was like almost like he was stacking and shedding a guy trying to block him, and then goes and gets the ball carrier. Really good. Yeah, we don't have a category for best offensive lineman tackle of the week, but maybe we need to do that now moving forward. It was really just excellent football play by a guy who's that's what happens when you're 32 years old playing college football. You're heady and make those kind of plays.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to create that category, you are more than welcome to, because we are treading on your territory here. The best offensive tackle of the week. But just shout out the guy. Mark Collins for BYU also had an awesome interception in the red zone. It was perfect safety play. He came over, he helped, made the catch, tiptoed, stayed in bound. That was in the fourth quarter. That was like another preventing SMU from scoring in the red zone. That's 2 red zone turnovers for SMU. And so this BYU defense really got it done. They have work to do on offense, but this is a really good win. And Kalani Sitake was really excited about it. At the end of the game, after they got a stop, he dropped "That's what I'm talking about" on the sideline after the last stop. Just like to anybody who is listening, that's what he was talking about. So he loved it. Congratulations. That got me excited about what BYU did. So let me go to a guy that blew my mind now. And I'm going back to the Iowa State game, and I'm going to running back Caleb Johnson, who had 25 carries for 187 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had runs in this game of 26, 27, 37, and 54 yards. And then on his final 13 carries, he had 20 yards total.
Yeah.
After his last touchdown, that Iowa extended its lead out with his last touchdown, Iowa then on its next possessions punted 4 straight times. And after he was 12 carries for 167 yards leading up to his 3-yard touchdown. At that moment when he scored, he had 12 carries for 167 yards. He then had 13 carries for 20 yards the rest of the game. So it blew my mind both directions, Landis. It blew it this way, and then it blew it this way, because he was so dominant and so awesome. There was also some really bad play calling by Iowa. Iowa State, as you mentioned, got some really critical stops. They failed from the 3-yard line at one point. They threw a play-action pass on first down that Cade McNamara sailed. Then they had LaShawn Williams in the game on second down, and he just ran up the middle for no yards. And they brought Caleb Johnson back in the game on third down and threw again out of the shotgun on 3rd and 3. Again, identity. You want to be new Iowa, but they didn't give him Caleb Johnson is destroying Iowa State. They get to the 3-yard line and they don't give him the ball. And then the next time they got there, they had 1st and goal from the 3-yard line, and they gave him the ball on first down, and he scored no problem.
Yeah.
So they did not. And then, they didn't lean into him when they needed to. And then they were like, oh, wait, he's dominating the game. Let's make our entire offense Caleb Johnson. And then he couldn't do anything because Iowa State was geared up to stop him. So he is so big and so smooth in the open field. Mm-hmm. There was great blocking. He had some big holes on the edge, some great tight end blocking by Iowa. So he's not necessarily we're just running through guys, but what a size speed package. And then what a complete failure for this to happen. He had a sequence, Bill, where I think he had a 26-yard run. He had a 37-yard run and a 26-yard run on back-to-back plays. They got down to the 14-yard line. Then that's when they got to the 1st and goal at the 3. At that moment, Iowa was ahead 10-0 after those 2 gigantic Caleb Johnson runs and ready to score again. I would have bet $100,000 at that moment that Iowa was going to win. Because at that moment, it felt like Iowa was going to win 30-0.
Yeah.
They were completely dominating, and Caleb Johnson was leading the domination. So credit to Iowa State, which you already gave, but also like Iowa had it. And Tim Lester, like they couldn't figure out the play calling to take advantage of something when it was working and then maybe get away from something when it wasn't working anymore. I like to watch Caleb Johnson early. It's like, you're telling me this guy's going to have 13 carries for 20 yards down the stretch on 4 straight drives that end in a punt. You wouldn't believe it because he's a monster, man.
Yeah, Iowa kind of turtled a little bit. I think Iowa thought it had the game in control when it clearly did not. Which is why I think it was content just kind of running inefficiently, or was afraid to put the ball in Cade McNamara's hands, which I guess I don't disagree with outright either, because I didn't think he was very good in that game. But Caleb Johnson's awesome. I sent this to you guys during the game, I think, or at least I meant to. Maybe I forgot. Iowa had 13 runs of 20 yards or more all of last season, and Caleb Johnson has 5 through 2 games. Pretty good.
Poor Brian Ferentz. It's like, just go. But again, it's because, I mean, you can see he's not just running over people. Like sometimes, like you watch Ashton GT, sometimes it's like, well, he's just running over people. So he was getting great blocking, great play calls, and then he was taking advantage of it. So it just was stunning. If you to think where that game was and where it wound up, it just kind of is stunning a little bit. All right, who blew your mind as a player?
Aiden Childs for Michigan State, the quarterback. I would maybe put him in tandem with Nick Marsh, the freshman receiver.
Yes.
But I thought that this was a nice kind of bounce back / step forward for Aiden Childs and helping Michigan State come back to beat Maryland on the road. Aiden Childs was 24 of 39 for 363 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks in a 27-24 win against Maryland. The 3 picks, I think, are just the kind of things you're going to have to live with a young guy who's doing a lot of stuff for the first time and who is hyper aggressive about throwing the ball down the field. I think you had the stat last week, right, that he was 0 for 7 on throws of 20 yards or more down the field. He was 3 for 7 in this game, so a little better, but still 3 for 7, 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick. The biggest of those 3 completions being a 77-yard touchdown pass to Nick Marsh with 4 minutes and 11 seconds left to tie the game. And then Michigan State went on to win it with a last-second field goal on that game-winning drive that ended with the game-winning field goal. Aiden Childs, 4 of 5 for 37 yards, 3 runs for 10 yards. 2 of those runs went for a first down. It just felt like it was coming a little easier for him in this game. And it was a better test, too, against Maryland than he faced against FAU. So, clearly a lot of things to work through for Aiden Childs still. He's only 18 years old. Like, made that point a couple times during the game that he's only 18 years old. But you can see it. Like, when everything's right and he lets that thing rip down the field, you can absolutely see it. He's going, I think, to win them a game they're not supposed to win this year because he's got too many tools. He might lose them a game they're not supposed to lose because he might throw 4 picks. But I think he's going to win them a game that they're not supposed to win because of what he can do.
I mean, Saturday was one of those games. They were 8-point underdogs. That was like on the road against the Maryland team that looked pretty good in week 1.
Yeah, for sure.
But like, I like that combination. So we've talked about Nick Marsh. Like, as far as anyone named not Jeremiah Smith among true freshmen in the North, Nick Marsh is the guy to watch. Like, awesome that he is getting the chance to make plays like that. But when you're telling me that Aiden Childs is hitting big plays and then also is leading a game-winning drive with efficiency, run, and pass, that's what we're talking about. And 3 of 7 on deep balls is great. I mean, we're talking like if you're 40-50% on those shots, they're 50-50 balls. I mean, they're not all 50-50 balls. But like, that's, again, I love looking up that stat on PFF. I think Bo Nix was 26 of 51 on throws of 20 yards or more last year. So if you're like 3 of 7 is so much better than 0 of 7. Because that's
that math checks out. Yeah,
that's at least 60 yards of offense. And when one of them, so they have to keep trying. So the fact that they threw 7 deep balls or 7 passes that were down the field last week and didn't hit any of them, and they threw 7 again, like, you can't pull it back. I'm like, the idea. I'm glad they didn't say, "Oh man, we didn't hit anything. I guess we'll just run the ball." It's like, no. Yeah. You've got to let this guy be who he is. And I think we have enough really talented, interesting young quarterbacks in the North that we are you've got to let this guy be who he is and maybe live with a couple mistakes. That's a conversation, I think, across teams, across coaching staffs right now in the North. It's going to come up later with the guy I want to talk about. But like, tip of the cap to Jonathan Smith and that staff and Aiden Childs for bouncing back from a rough week 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick Marsh, by the way, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 194 yards, and that game-tying touchdown in the fourth quarter.
True freshman.
Yeah. Really good.
Michigan State has a chance to your point, I think they have a chance to win a bigger game. They have a chance to really cause a problem for somebody that maybe wouldn't be expecting it with Michigan. Two backs, Jack Belling, Montori Foster, like a new. All right, team with the big question. This will be our chance to talk about Notre Dame on this show, since we did talk about it a lot on the Saturday show. What's your question for Notre Dame?
Just like what you do with Riley Leonard, I think from here on out. Listen, dude, there are a billion questions coming out of losing a game to Northern Illinois. Maybe the biggest among them is like, what's up, Marcus Freeman? Are you the right guy for the job? If I maybe could like drill down on something more team specific, it's where you go with Riley Leonard from here. He's just not a sophisticated passer. 4.9 yards per attempt against Northern Illinois. He looks scared to throw the ball down the field against that team. And then like the one time he tried to do it, he threw an inexcusable interception that gave Northern Illinois the ball to come back and come back down the field and win that game. 3 for 10 in the game, throwing it more than 10 yards down the field. We're not even talking deep shots, just more than 10 yards down the field. There's just not a lot there with them trying to throw the ball. And it's kind of a shame because I actually like what Notre Dame has at skill, at least compared to past seasons with Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell and Mitchell Evans and Jaden Greathouse and like those running backs too. But I don't know if Notre Dame is in a spot where you try to work through all that stuff and like build up this passing attack and get Riley Leonard to a place where he can be a more efficient and dangerous thrower of the football, or if you just really lean into his legs and run him a lot and have more of like an option style attack. I don't know, but they play Purdue this week, and that now in my mind is not necessarily a gimme because I don't know what this offense is able to muster against anybody if they're not able to hit like the couple of big runs that they hit against Texas A&M. And like, I like Jeremiah Love a ton, and he was actually okay against Northern Illinois, but I'm just surprised. I'm surprised we're 2 games into the season and Riley Leonard remains such a big question mark at quarterback. I really thought we were going to see a different level of play out of him this year, and we haven't.
Okay.
Clearly.
Yeah. That Purdue's coming off an off week, so they have 2 weeks to prepare for Notre Dame. Purdue's going to be better than people think. This is another candidate for at least maybe not a full big game breakdown, but this is a real thing. This is a real thing on Saturday. And again, great home schedule for the Boilermakers this year. All right. My team with the big question is Kansas. 4.4 yards per attempt for Jalen Daniels against Illinois. It was his worst since his freshman year in 2020. They got nothing down the field at all. And Lance Leipold, he wasn't defensive, but after the game, he said, he was asked if why did Kansas struggle offensively? And he said, struggle? How? We gained more yards than they did. We had a 100-yard rusher. Now, there weren't huge explosive plays, but I wouldn't say we totally struggled. We were 6 of 13 on third downs. We got a 4th down conversion. You're playing a good Big Ten football team. It's not going to be like playing on air by any stretch of the imagination. So a lot of credit to Illinois, but they got nothing. They got nothing down the field at all. And so 18 completions, 140 yards will they have it? Now, Devin Neal's a great running back, but are they going to be able to complement that rushing attack with stretching the field a little bit? Because if not, you're going to sit on stuff the way Illinois sat on things on Saturday night. And again, the worst one was what we talked about, the great read by Xavier Scott, where he triggered and made the pick 6. Lance Leipold, the one right before the half is more of an execution on the perimeter of what the play is blocked to be. So that's like one of those, again, it looks like it's on the quarterback, but maybe there was some like technique execution issues with getting that done. Of all the Power 5 quarterbacks in week 2, that 4.4 yards per attempt was 64th out of 68. And of the guys behind Jalen Daniels, one of them was Cade McNamara. So when you're in Iowa passing territory here, it's not good. They should be better at it, but like they played a real defense. And again, credit to Illinois, and there was just nothing there.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it was Brett Bielema said in the week going up to the game, like you have to make Jalen Daniels throw to beat Kansas. So why Kansas like kind of leaned into that, I'm not entirely sure. because I think it's true, right? Like I like Jalen Daniels a lot.
Yeah,
he's a little risky with the football at times. Not the most polished guy in the world. Good athlete, but I think you need to use that run game to protect him a little bit. And it just seemed like Kansas really got away from it in a way that is a little puzzling.
Yeah, they got to figure out how they want to do this. All right. Game that kind of bored me, and it was while I was staying up for all 3 hours and 50 minutes of it on Friday night. That is an 8 p.m. local start and an 11:55 p.m. local finish. Actually, 8:05 start. Nearly midnight in Chicago for Duke Northwestern. In that game, 14 punts combined, 3 turnovers, 6 scores, and 2 missed field goals. And it went to double overtime. And the good thing about double overtime, Bill, is no punts in double overtime. So that was progress in the double overtime, though. So it was like, it's a double overtime game. It's like, how can it be boring? It's like, because if you watched it. So Northwestern's has a pretty good defense. Malik Murphy, he looks great, right? And when he's on. Awful early. And then like in the fourth quarter, figured it out. And they were just RPOing the Northwestern defense to death. And then all of a sudden it's like, man, why doesn't everybody just run an RPO and hit a wide open slant on every play? Because it looks like the easiest thing in the world to do when it's happening. And it looked really easy against the Northwestern defense. But Northwestern hung in. Then in overtime, they handed the ball to Cam Porter, their good physical running back, 6 times in the 2 overtimes. He had 6 carries for 34 yards. He was the entire offense in the overtime. They got to a 3rd and 1 in the double overtime at the 3-yard line, and they called a quarterback run for Mike Wright, who just ran sideways and took an 8-yard loss. And I think if they just would have decided you have to go for it because they had the ball second in the second overtime, I think if they just would have given the ball to Cam Porter until Duke stopped them, I think they would have won.
Yeah.
Because 3rd and 1 from the 3, give it to him on 3rd down, give it to him on 4th down. Then after you score the touchdown, give it to him on the 2-point conversion. And that's what I thought was going to happen. And I thought Northwestern was going to win. Now, it looked like a terrible play call when it happened. I've seen people go back and look at it that maybe it looked like Wright stretched it out too much. There actually was a cutback lane there that he should have taken, but maybe don't put your new quarterback in that situation and just lean on your stud running back who's been carrying you.
He stretched that run out so much that I thought he was trying to sell a fake before like throwing it over the top of the defense.
Yeah.
But that wasn't because we've seen that before, right? Like fake a quarterback sweep kind of thing and then throw it over the defense. But that's clearly not what he was doing.
Kansas State like beat Tulane on that play, I think, right? There's somebody like there. Yes, a mobile quarterback, you run it like you can even tuck it, and then all of a sudden you're throwing it. It was right there. It was an inefficient offensive game that was not very exciting to watch, and it was right there for Northwestern. They didn't get it done. So that's a tough one, and I guess you can defend it, but I think sometimes again that's a younger than 30-year-old offensive coordinator in his first year. Sometimes just do the thing that works until the other team stops it, and Northwestern didn't do that, and so I stayed up until I had to get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning to go to Cincinnati. And I just kind of wanted to go to bed. And I was like, ugh. And then that game went to double overtime. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I have to watch this game. So anyway.
Well, at least you got to see what maybe might have been Mike Wright's last play as a starting quarterback in Northwestern because he got benched.
Oh, is that official?
Adam Rittenberg, 5 minutes ago. Northwestern is making a quarterback change as Jack Lausch will start in place of Mike Wright this week against Eastern Illinois per David Braun. Northwestern is still looking for its first touchdown pass this season.
It's almost like we planned it out. That's some good hosting and that's some good YouTubing right there.
That was Mike. Mike pointed that out.
Oh, that was some good producing because actually I had no idea it was happening. Thank you, Mike. Wow. Well timed. Okay. So that sideways run cost him a game and cost a guy his job for the moment. I mean, it was really bad. It was quite a bad play. All right. So I was bored watching it well into the wee hours. Nebraska, Colorado. Why did it bore you?
Because Colorado's not good. Nebraska just kind of sat on them. Like it was 28-10. It felt like it really could have been like 50-10 if Nebraska wanted to push the envelope. I will say Colorado's defense played better in the second half of that game, but I also thought it was pretty obvious that Nebraska was content with its 28 points because it was very clear that Colorado was not going to do anything against Nebraska's defense. It was a really, I thought, disheartening offensive performance from Colorado. Nebraska did nothing other than play with the light box. They did what I said they were going to do: play with the light box, invite Colorado to run the ball. Colorado had no interest in running the ball, didn't run it well at all. Still ended up getting pressured a ton, even though Nebraska wasn't even blitzing that much. And they just couldn't do anything. Couldn't hit the big plays he needed to hit. Shedeur Sanders was getting rocked all game. Colorado couldn't block Nebraska, particularly the middle of Nebraska's defensive line. I felt this as I was watching it. I didn't go and look it up, but thankfully Max Olson tweeted this out earlier on Monday. Nebraska pressured Shedeur Sanders on 22 dropbacks and only sent 3 or 4 on 19 of those 22.
Oh my gosh.
It's bad.
And didn't we get a post-game quote from Dion that like even he admitted he's concerned about the offensive line now? Like even he was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is not good. This is Colorado has not made the progress it needs to make in the areas where it was deficient last year to be something more than it was last year. It's a real problem.
So they're in real danger here because, again, I gave them more credit, I think, than anybody for their week 1 win against North Dakota State, just meaning like nobody else gave them any credit. And I thought like, hey, they had a big drive when they needed it. They made some defensive plays in the second half. I'm not making excuses for Colorado because like that was really bad. I'm on alert for Nebraska being quite good.
I think that defense is legit. Yeah. I thought that defensive
the run game they can run the ball a little bit.
A little bit. Like Dante Dowdell had like 70 yards. It wasn't like he had 150 yards. But so the thing that bored me the most, and maybe I just got my hopes up too high, was that I really thought Dylan Raiola was going to let it rip in this game.
Yeah.
He had 30 pass attempts for 185 yards. His average depth of target was 5.5, and 13 of his 30 throws were behind the line of scrimmage. Like they're protecting him. Like I get it. I don't think that's actually like an indictment in any way on Dylan Raiola, but I thought, especially when Nebraska got up, they might like let Dylan Raiola show off a little bit, and instead, probably smartly so, Matt Rule was just like, no, we'll sit on the game because they're not going to score on us. So it's fine. They got the win. That's all that matters. But yeah, I did want to see a little bit of fireworks from that offense that I don't think we saw.
We want to see a team force Nebraska into a shootout, maybe in the horseshoe.
Maybe
we'd be here for a Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith, Dylan Raiola.
I say shootout is pretty good. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Okay. All right. Game that you're glad that you watched. What game?
Georgia Tech. Yeah, the Georgia Tech Syracuse game. We did a fair amount on Kyle McCord in the offense on Saturday. I just wanted to quickly point out one thing from that game. So Marlo Wax, the Syracuse's starting middle linebacker, is out for a few weeks. And I was worried about pulling him out of a defense against a team that ran the ball exceedingly well the first 2 games. Georgia Tech did not run it all that well against Syracuse outside of Haynes King doing a little bit, but I think that's okay. So I wanted to give props to Syracuse's defense for doing a very nice job against the run. And then I also wanted to give props to Fadil Diggs, the transfer from Texas A&M defensive end, moved back to linebacker. He played in place of Marlo Wax. That was their move, is to take Fadil Diggs off of the defensive line, play a lot of 3-man fronts instead of 4-man fronts, and have Fadil Diggs play basically outside linebacker for the majority of the game. I think he only played 6 snaps on the defensive line, and the rest of his work, I think, was at linebacker. And he had 2 big tackles for loss in that game, including one on 4th down. He looked pretty comfortable doing it. So
wow,
nice wrinkle there from Syracuse defensively, a nice individual effort from Fadil Diggs, and a great job overall of taking away the one thing I think that Georgia Tech is able to do in winning that game.
Really some ingenuity from Syracuse. Again, tip of the cap. Well done. The game I'm glad I saw is the one I was at, which is Pitt Cincinnati. We talked a lot about it from a Pitt side of things, but a really tough one for Cincinnati. And again, I'll be curious how this shakes out. The winning team fired their AD. Yeah. Scott Satterfield. I don't think Cincinnati did like horrible things to give the game away. At the end, they were not efficient and ended up punting the ball a lot. in the second half, which is how you allow a team to come back from down 27-6. They had 3 straight punts while Pittsburgh scored 3 straight touchdowns. They did miss a 25, really tough sequence that Cincinnati missed a 25-yard field goal at the end of the first half when it felt like it was going to be the end of the first half. And there were like 40 seconds left. And then Pitt came down and moved the ball really quickly and kicked a 53-yarder and made it. So that's a 6-point swing. Satterfield, there was no excuses. Corey Kiner, 20 carries for 149 yards for former Mr. Football in Ohio. Tip of the cap to that. They were missing their right tackle, Philip Wilder, and I think they felt that a little bit. But Scott Satterfield was particularly upset about a particular play on Pitt's, I think, final game-winning drive for the game-winning field goal. It was on a 4th and 4. And so we have the clip. Watch this clip and find the penalty, because Scott Satterfield wasn't sure he saw it. So they're in the shotgun, Pitt's in the shotgun, and the back judge in the middle of the field throws a flag. Did you see it, Bill, when we're playing Find the Penalty here on our YouTube show? Okay.
I was looking for a movement on the offense. I didn't see any. So I don't know what else.
It's on the defense. It's on the defense. So it's 4th and 4 for Pitt.
Oh, I see it. Disconcerting signals. Yeah, I see it.
Oh, you even know what to call it. Disconcerting signals.
The guy in the middle of the line right over the center is yelling before the snap.
Is he actually yelling? Can you see him yelling?
I can see him.
Definitely,
he's definitely
bobbing.
Yelling.
He's definitely bobbing. Okay,
I'm assuming he's yelling. Yeah.
Because he's going like this. So he's standing over the line and he goes like this, bobs down, and then bobs down a second time. And I almost think you can see the official let the first one go.
Yeah.
And then when he does it the second time, he throws the flag.
They're really cracking down on that this year.
Okay. So Scott Satterfield did not like that call. And he's saying like our stadium's so loud, you can't hear anything anyway. I don't know. It's a huge call. And it feels like, to your point, like if they're cracking down on it, it seems like he did it, right? Like you would say that
penalty.
Yeah. It was a penalty. So in the end, like it's one of those things. It's a 4th down play. Now they might have converted it anyway, but that's a huge 4th down play. Scott Satterfield didn't dwell on it. He didn't say that's the only reason they lost or anything, but just a convergence of things going wrong for Cincinnati. It was a really exciting game. And as Scott Satterfield said, for 3.5 quarters, our guys played outstanding. And I think that was true. Like they really made life difficult on Pitt. Brendan Sorsby executed pretty well. But then at the end, 2 of 6 for 23 yards on those final 3 drives that led to punts. Like, again, I think it was a little bit like Iowa. A team got up and then sort of didn't know what to do and how to run its offense with a lead. Corey Kiner's a great back. He gashed Pitt last year and he gashed him again, 20 for 149, but they couldn't find a way with a back like that and a veteran offensive line to put the game away.
Yeah, and I thought coverage got a little loose there at the end too. Just a couple breakdowns to let Pitt get back in the game. Yeah.
Let Des Reed run wild on like a little short crossing route. All of a sudden, he shot out of a cannon for a touchdown. So just like a really tough one for Cincinnati. I was glad I was there for it. But again, for people who are a little unsure about Scott Satterfield, like they're going to have to come out. They got to beat Miami this week.
Yeah,
rivalry game. I think it's at Miami of Ohio. Like they need to win this because I think they're a pretty good football team, but they can't let a bad 8 minutes create a downhill effect for their entire season. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the group of 5, and then we'll run through very quickly all the teams we haven't gotten to yet in the North. And then at the end, we're going to do our rankings because last week we did our rankings at the beginning, and then it didn't work out for us. All of that next on Kings of the North. Back on Kings of the North. So grateful that everybody is here. Our numbers are a little bit up today, which is just the most awesome thing ever. If you want to give us a thumb, So appreciated. If you want to subscribe so you don't miss anything we're putting out there, so appreciated. If you want to tell a friend, if you want to go out, if you want to like in your place of business right now, if you want to go out into your yard, if you just want to in the gym, wherever you might be watching or listening to this and just shout, Kings of the North, we'd take that too. And then someone would say, what? Kings of the North? What is that? And then you would have to try to explain what this is, which actually might put you in a tough spot. Well, it's these two guys. And anyway, thanks so much for being here. We're just super excited. This is the beginning of our third week of live shows. I will be at Alabama at Wisconsin this weekend, third straight weekend that KOTN will be on the road. I think we're coming off a great week 2 of Northern games. And again, we just talk about the hard work and the sweat that these young athletes put in and make it also interesting for all of us. And so for all the players at Pitt and at Cincinnati and Iowa State and Iowa and Michigan State and Maryland and Kansas and Illinois and BYU and like just all these great players who just make this game so interesting and like create an opportunity for us to be here with you guys to talk about it. So grateful because the North is rising up. G5 minutes, Landis. You named a segment, and you want to make sure we touch on the MAC. So, what are your MAC thoughts as we talk about G5 teams, group of 5 teams, for 5 minutes?
Yeah, my MAC thoughts are just coming off of a week where Bowling Green gave Penn State all it could handle, and Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. We got to put teams on upset. We got to put teams on upset alert going into this weekend. Miami, Ohio, who you mentioned, is hosting Cincinnati. The one I think is more interesting is Toledo going to Mississippi State. I think there's a real opportunity there for the MAC to spring an upset over the SEC.
Let's go.
I think it's when I looked this morning, it was like a 9.5 point spread. I'm not sure what it is now. Mississippi State's bad. Its defense in particular, I think, is pretty bad, especially up front. Toledo is, I think, in some respects, the class of the MAC. It's either Toledo or, I don't know, Miami, Bowling Green, Northern Illinois. There's a couple good teams there.
There are.
I think it can happen. I would like to call my shot now. The MAC is upsetting an SEC team this week.
I love it. You're speaking my language, brother. Yeah. And so we want to give a lot of credit to Northern Illinois. I would like to maybe have somebody on this week to talk about Northern Illinois, that program, what they've been able to do consistently. It really is a shining example of like what the North does well in a lot of ways, even when you're taking out one of your Northern brothers to show how good you are. So a lot of credit there. And one of my lights did go off. I'm pretty sure it's plugged in, but it's not behaving like it's plugged in. So I have to go double check the plug of one of the lights. Also, while we're doing this, I may as well let's see if I can. Okay. So did this ever happen to you? Have you ever had a mix-up with Amazon? Have you had an Amazon mix-up before?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's normal? Okay. So I ordered these TV lights, one of which just went off. I'm going to go fix it here in a second. And they were so good, I ordered a second set of TV lights. They are on big stands, and they are like the squares like this big. It's quite a big thing that you order, right? So it comes in a pretty big box. So I ordered another set of them, and Amazon sent me this. Yeah. And said, this is your package. And we think it is just a piece of metal with a couple rollers on it. For those who are listening on podcasts, we think it's possible that there is a robot that works in the Amazon factory that is trying to get help, and that the robot detached its own arm and sent it to me to say, help me. And it's some kind of message, because Amazon thought this was like multiple hundreds of dollars of lights. And so that's the first time that happened to me. And as an old person, it makes me never want to order anything online again and just go to a store and buy the thing that I can see and get my hands on. But hopefully we'll get it worked out. So that was a first for me. This is normal to order a thing.
It's not normal. It's not normal, but it happens. Yeah.
I mean, the things I ordered were like 40 pounds. This came in an envelope. It was like, here it is. It's like, this should be a 4-foot box, not an 8x11 envelope with a please help us, Mr. Kings of the North. We need you. So if you guys see a one-armed robot in an Amazon warehouse, here's his arm.
You have his limb. Yeah.
I have his limb. Big win for Oregon State, and we're fired up. I guess, do we count the Pac-12, the two-team Pac-12 as a group of 5 right now, right? I mean, that's okay. That's not offensive, are they? Okay.
No, I think so. Yeah, they're Mountain West adjacent.
They are.
They are Power Conference adjacent, I think.
So we are getting the 2 rivalry games. We're getting Oregon State this week and Washington State this week. And we're super fired up about that, right?
I'm fired up about it because Oregon just had to play Boise State, which is the number 6 rushing offense in the country. And here comes Oregon State, which is the number 5 rushing offense in the country. Oregon State seems like it's pretty good on both lines of scrimmage. Just shut out San Diego State in a game that I kind of thought was going to be close. So that to me feels like it's going to be another kind of physical test for what Oregon has going on up front. And then Washington State just hammered Texas Tech. Texas Tech, I kind of thought might be sneaky in the Big 12, went to Pullman and lost. And John Mateer, Washington State's quarterback, ran all over them. So Washington's defense has not allowed a touchdown yet this year. Here comes Washington State.
Let's go.
Keep it going. Yeah.
All right. So we will check in on those 2 Northern bangers this week. Let's run through our other teams that we haven't talked about yet. West Virginia bounced back against Albany. CJ Donaldson ran for 125. Jaheim Wright ran for 100. Garrett Green ran for 68. Overall, 32 carries, 305 yards, 9.5 yards per carry. So they just leaned into their run game after a result against Penn State they didn't like. They do have problems in the secondary. They allowed 306 passing yards against Albany, and Neil Brown talked about it in the Penn State game. They're not playing the ball very well in the air. Yeah. And I think that continues to be an issue. Edward Vesterinen, I'm going to say it wrong. One of their starting defensive linemen got hurt and is going to be out for a couple weeks. And so they got to get the secondary stuff figured out. But Garrett Green got back in the rhythm a little bit. Neil Brown said after the game, he just did a better job of being in control. He just almost got too high against Penn State. He's excitable. I don't ever want to put out that flame, but at the same time, he can't get overly high. He's got to continue to play within himself, and I think he did that. So I think lesson learned, and I'm thinking the next time we see West Virginia against a good opponent, they'll play better than they did against Penn State.
They're going to get one this week, right?
Who are they playing this week?
Pitt.
Oh, the brawl. What am I doing? Pick 'em. Did you see that? The West Virginia Pitt games, the brawl's a pick 'em. How about that? Yeah. From where we thought going into the season that's a pick 'em at Pitt. Yeah, we almost borderline should go to that, but we're not going to. All right, Ohio State for you.
Just 56-0. Ohio State hammered Western Michigan. Quinshon Judkins with 108 rushing yards and Jeremiah Smith with 119 receiving yards. Both had more yards than Western Michigan had as a team. And Emeka Ibuka with 98 receiving yards almost eclipsed Western Michigan's output too. That's probably all you need to know. Western Michigan had 5 yards of total offense in the second half as Ohio State got its first shutout since 2019.
Wow. Okay. Ohio State off this week, and still Aiden Childs in a couple weeks against Michigan State. That should be at least a little more interesting. Minnesota got back on track against Rhode Island. Max Brosmer had the highest adjusted completion percentage in the power conferences this week. Now, part of that is because Minnesota had 5 drops, so they got to hold on to the ball a little bit. But he started slow, and then the rest of the game, was 5 of 7 in the first quarter, and then really got rolling. They also had 3 picks, including a pick 6 by Jack Henderson. Our guy, Dragan Kesic, got back on the horse, hit a 53-yarder early on. I think did miss a 55-yarder, but was 2 of 3 on field goals. And they're working it out. And PJ Fleck talked a lot about it after the game. They are working it out. They moved, see if I get this right. The guy who started at right tackle for them last year, they moved to right guard to start the year, and they moved him back to right tackle for week 2. And then they put somebody at right guard, and then they replaced him in the middle of the first half. So they are working. Quinn Carroll moved back to right tackle. Yeah. So they are working things out, and I appreciate the fact that they're still trying. Ashton Beers took over at right guard for them. So I think they feel like they've maybe found their best offensive line. It took a week and a half, but 24 of 30 for Max Brosmer. And they're still they've decided they think they might be a team that has to throw it to run it. And that's, as PJ Fleck said, quote after the game, we haven't done that in the past. That's not their deal. So they're figuring this out, but I think there's potential there with that offense. I'm glad they at least made a step after week 1 offensively didn't go the way. If they had played this well offensively against North Carolina, they would have won.
They would have won. Yeah. Darius Taylor played, right? Came back.
He did. Yep. Had a touchdown. Yep.
Nice. Good for them. The answer is always beers. Remember that, folks.
Yeah.
Maryland. We talked about Michigan State beating Maryland in College Park. There's 2 things I want to mention. One, I was pretty disappointed that Mike Loxley, after an offseason of talking about how this was going to be a different style Maryland offense, they wanted to be more physical. They wanted to run the ball. They have good backs. They have a quarterback in Billy Edwards who can run the ball. Staring at a 4th and 1 from the Michigan State 23-yard line with practically a chance to salt the game away if they convert. Instead, opts for a 41-yard field goal, misses it. Aiden Childs to Nick Marsh for 77 yards on the next play, and then they lose in a last-second field goal. I think you got to go for that if you're Mike Loxley.
Okay.
Get the yard, sustain the drive, try to hold the ball, go win the game. And then the last thing, probably more important, Maryland's defense has given up a lot of big plays. They give a bunch of shots to Michigan State. Maryland has now given up 7 plays of 30 yards or more in its first 2 games this year, which is tied for the 3rd most in the country. All of which is to say, I think you could be on to something about a potential down year in College Park after a promising week 1.
Okay. Yeah. I thought I was thrown off by week 1. Wisconsin, they're getting ready to host Bama on Saturday. I will be there. Tyler Van Dyke, 17 of 26 for 214 yards. Ches Malusi, 60 yards in the ground. Cade Yakimelli, 8 for 73. Pretty good. I think they were up 14-0 early and really looking good. Van Dyke had like a beautiful 40-yard throw on the run that was like, that's former Heisman candidate Tyler Van Dyke. And then all of a sudden it was 17-10 in the middle of the 3rd quarter and South Dakota was driving. So this is a team, like, again, it looked like, okay, Wisconsin's going to go thump somebody. And all of a sudden they're like in a game. And then did they drop the punt? I don't know. Yeah. They dropped a punt. South Dakota recovered, got held to a field goal, but like they were dominating and then all of a sudden in danger of losing. So like they've got to get their stuff together. They're a little bit like their scoreboard is not matching their game, right? It's like they're coming off the golf course and being like, man, I had it great today. It's like, what'd you shoot? 146. It's like, okay, that's not going to get it done against Bama. So they know what's coming, but they were up 14-0 with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. And it was 17-13 in the second half. So like, it's unbelievable. Yeah. They went punt, field goal, punt, drop a punt, field goal, punt, like after their 14-0 lead. So there's some stuff there. Will Pauling had a big play as their best receiver. Like there's some stuff there, but they have to show all their best stuff. There are enough flashes to make me think they have a chance to at least hang with Bama. But if they dork around the way they have in the first 2 weeks, they're going to get their doors blown off. So like they have to stop showing something and then forgetting how to play football for 20 minutes. So I'm on alert for them. Like I'm a little nervous for them if they get a little tight for this one. I'm nervous that it could get embarrassing. But it's not a lost cause. Just let it go and play your best and keep your foot on the gas. Sorry. Washington for you.
Maybe Wisconsin sandbagging. Washington beats Eastern Michigan 30-9. I thought it was like a really nice win for Washington. Started slow, and then I think it's 4th and 1 on Washington's like own like 30 maybe. They're deep in their own territory. It's 4th and 1. They have not scored yet. Jed Fish is like, I'm rolling the dice. They go forward on 4th and 1, and he explained it afterward. He had a run play called. Eastern Michigan took a timeout. They talked about it some more. Steve Belichick, the defensive coordinator, said, our job is to stop them no matter where they get the ball, so go for it. They go back out. They call play action pass. Will Rogers to Giles Jackson gets like 30 yards on 4th and 1. They go down and score. The offense gets rolling a little bit. Will Rogers ends up throwing 4 touchdown passes. Jeremiah Hunter, who we mentioned leading into the game, gets 5 for 72 and a touchdown. And so it's good for the offense. And then last point, there are 6 defenses in the FBS that have not allowed a touchdown yet. Missouri, Purdue, Ole Miss, Georgia, Ohio State, and Washington.
Look at you. You bring a little Belichick aura. You talk a little Belichick aura in the Pacific Northwest.
A little bit. A little bit.
Listen, we're not against all sons of coaches. We're just against the ones who aren't good at their jobs.
Yeah.
So right. Steve Belichick looks pretty good at his job so far. All right, let's move on to Kansas State. I thought they were lucky to win against Tulane. Tulane had a game-tying touchdown in the final minutes that was wiped away by a pick. It's a questionable call. But Chris Kleiman afterward called it a culture win. So I think they were happy that they got after it in the second half. He said he challenged guys at halftime. The offensive line is a work in progress, Kleiman said, but it's nice to have Avery Johnson who can move around a little bit. And then I think they've just got to let Avery Johnson go. They've got to let him find his grip. I think they're being a little cautious so far. They were outgained in this game. The Tulane quarterback looked like the better quarterback for most of the game. So I think Avery Johnson, he needs to settle in. They have to help him settle in. And I do think they're not going to play. It's home Friday night against Arizona. You got to keep up with Noah Fafita and McMillan and that Arizona offense. So I think maybe governor off for the Kansas State offense. They survived. Good job surviving. But if they don't find something more, DJ Giddens, good back, but they gotta let Avery Johnson make some plays, or they're going to lose by 2 touchdowns to Arizona. So I hope they rise to the occasion.
Yeah, I hope so too. Quickly on Indiana. They played Western Illinois, man. Western Illinois is like the 300th best football team at any level in the country. They won 77-3. School records for yardage of 703 yards and points 77. Good for Indiana. I'm sure it was a great time. I don't know what to take from it because Western Illinois is a truly awful football team that has not won a game in 3 years.
Let's get him on the show. Listen, it's hard to be part of that. But Kurt Signetti is going to let the Hoosiers be Hoosiers. Rutgers is off this week. I think we have 5 Northern teams that are off this coming week. Iowa State, Syracuse, Rutgers, Ohio State, and somebody else. So those are our 5 who are off. Kyle Monangai ran for 186. He is second in the nation in rushing to Ashton Genty. So Ethan Kaliak-Manis threw for 230 and 3 touchdowns. They ran as a team for 285 and 4 touchdowns. Good balance after their off week at Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech is already a little questionable, but this is a real chance for Rutgers to go get a really solid road win. And Greg Schiano has 2 weeks to prepare.
Yep. Penn State beat Bowling Green 34-27. Penn State could not stop Bowling Green in the first half and then stopped them just fine in the second half. Bowling Green in the second half went punt, interception, field goal, on average 2.6 yards per play. By and large, looked like the Penn State defense in the second half of that game. Very much did not look like the Penn State defense in the first half. I'm willing to chalk it up to a sleepy outing after a nice win at West Virginia. I thought Penn State's offense looked fine. Both Nick Singleton and Katron Allen each rushed for 100 yards. Drew Aller hit a couple deep shots. It wasn't super crisp, but they're still in a new offense. I think they're fine. I think it was just BG being a good MAC team that was ready to roll and really crisp on offense to start the game. And Penn State probably not being as locked in as it needed to be. Still got the win, so I think it's okay.
Yeah, Notre Dame would love to be telling that story this week. We just weren't locked in, but we got the win against the MAC team. All right, last one is Utah. Cam Rising left the game late in the first half with a cut on his hand. Kyle Whittingham after the game said it's not that serious. And I did see a clip of a fan in the stands, and I love when fans do the reporting for us. A fan in the stands yelling at Cam Rising, "Give us a thumbs up if you're good." And Cam Rising went like that. And it's okay, that's the report. So he should be fine. They have Utah State this week. They could sit him out, get the win against Utah State, and get him ready for Big 12. They just shut it down without him. Cam Rising was 8 of 14 for 92 yards when he got hurt. Isaac Wilson, Zach Wilson's brother, the backup who won the backup job, who I thought looked pretty good in the spring, 4 of 9 for 40. They just shut it down, didn't score in the second half. Stuff's going to happen. But if they... the number one thing with Utah football is Cam Rising. Not that it's that different for any other school. You need your quarterback healthy. But if we were making a list of teams that need their quarterback healthy the most, we got a dose last year of what Utah is when Cam Rising is not there. And so they need him to be healthy. So hopefully everything is okay. All right.
Hopefully.
Our rankings. Last week, we're not going to apologize for how we rank. We both are really leaning on results. The fact that you had Penn State, Notre Dame in the top 2 as your top 2 last week, Bill, and then Penn State looked and Notre Dame lost. That's just life when you're dealing with results as your foundation of your ranking, right?
Yeah, I think so. Mostly, it didn't move me off that ideology too much, but I probably shook it up a little bit based off maybe feeling like I was a little too hot on Penn State and Notre Dame in week 1. But
Okay.
I still let results but guide me more than anything else.
Okay. So let's run through your top 11 and a half. Again, this is like the 11 teams that we think are playing, are the best, whatever. It's our top 11.
Yeah.
And then the half is the team that we have our eye on. Who is your top 11 and a half, Bill?
Yeah. Number 1, I have Texas after its win in Ann Arbor this week. Number 2, I have Georgia. Number 3, I have Ohio State. Number 4, I have Miami. And that's the results there. I think still like going to win the way they did in Gainesville. I still think is pretty good to dominate the way they did. Penn State, I have 5, so I dropped Penn State after looking the way it did against Bowling Green. Alabama 6, Tennessee 7, Missouri, which has not allowed a point yet this season, at number 8, 89-0. I think they are in their first 2 games. Oregon, I have at number 9, because I actually think for as poorly as Oregon has played, like beating Boise State is a decent win. It's a better win than a lot of teams have right now. I have Ole Miss number 10. USC number 11, and my 11.5 is Iowa State because they've now gotten over the Iowa hump, and I'm curious to see where this goes as they try to compete for a Big 12 title.
I think I value the hump even more than you do because I have Iowa State actually ranked. By the way, Mike, these graphics look sharp, brother. All right. What is my top 11 and a half? I forget, so I'm going to read it off the TV. I also have Texas 1, and again, they're getting a handful of votes in the AP and the coaches poll, but this is how we do it. Like Texas went on the road to Michigan and dominated Michigan. So like that catches our attention. And yes, the neutral site win, that's not really neutral because it was in Atlanta against Clemson in week 1, still matters, but we both have Texas 1 and Georgia 2. I jumped Tennessee. I have Tennessee 3 because they went to Charlotte and beat the snot out of NC State. And I think Tennessee is going to be really good. Ohio State, I have 4. Penn State, I have 5. We have the same there. Utah, you took Utah out, huh?
Yeah.
No, Utah.
Cam Rising being hurt is that made me feel great.
Utah 6, 7 Ole Miss for me. I don't feel great about that, but I have to acknowledge it. USC is 8. Iowa State, I went ahead and ranked them. Winning on the road at Iowa against one of the best defenses in the country was enough for me to get them in there.
Yeah.
Miami is 10. Missouri is 11. And the 11.5 that I'm keeping an eye on is Nebraska. Because as you said, like they dominated without Dylan Raiola throwing the ball all over the place. And I do think they have playmakers. I do think they have a solid run game. And I think the defense looks quite good. So we have talked about the idea of could they be undefeated going into Ohio State, whatever that would make them 6-0 or 7-0 or 8-0, whatever they would be to have to be that. So like I'm officially right. Like eyeball, you got an eyeball on Nebraska? You eyeballing them?
I'm eyeballing Nebraska. Yeah. I mean, I figured Nebraska would win that game. I guess Nebraska's defense came away looking even more impressive than I thought it would. So I'm looking at them. Yeah. I do think that's going to be a boy. Look how good Nebraska is. They're undefeated coming to Ohio Stadium, and then Ohio State drops the hammer on them. But that's okay.
Yeah,
we'll take the ball until it gets there.
And I dropped Bama out because they were in a slugfest with USF going into the fourth quarter. So like they can earn their way back.
They also scored 28 points in the fourth quarter and won.
Yeah,
quite
I know. I stopped watching after the third quarter. So in my head, it's 14-3. So. But I think Tennessee would beat Alabama if they played tomorrow. And again, I don't love the neutral site thing, but I think like based on results, based on the way teams have played, I think Tennessee would beat Alabama. So like that
was a really impressive win for Tennessee. Yeah.
And I also think like Missouri would beat Alabama. So like that's where I am. They've got to show me a little bit more. All right. We went a little long. We started a little bit late. We thank you all for hanging in. But talking about Northern Ball is fun. And sometimes it's hard to, I wanted to do a 2-hour show. And you guys talk me back to 90 minutes. But a 90-minute show that leaks over is acceptable. And a 2-hour show that leaks over would be tough. Because if anyone knows me at all, I'm going to leak. So it's not a hard out, right? Not when Doug's here.
No. Can we isolate the I'm going to leak mic, please? Just so we have it.
I am here to sell anything. I will sell a robot arm. I will sell leakage protection. We're here for you. We have a gigantic northern audience. It's a very desirable audience up here in the north, isn't it, Bill? People, the advertisers want our people. So look for huge, gigantic commercials dropping in sooner than later. For now, we're going to have players on this week. We have a couple booked. I don't want to say who they are, but we have at least 2 player interviews set up. So we'll do that. We'll have Dan Wetzel on Tuesday. We'll reach out to some other people, and we have some good Northern bangers once again. But week 2 is going to be hard to top because it was awesome. All right, thanks to our producer Mike Yorstowski for making us look good and sound good. Thanks to all of you guys for being here. Again, if you're not watching, we're just 2 guys shouting in microphones in empty rooms. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.